Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Squat Cobbler. I'm Kelly at KELLYTHUL on Twitter and Instagram.
And I am Dr. Mike at Official Pagan on everything. Make sure you guys like, subscribe, and you're wearing your t shirt when you're doing it.
Yes, as you click on notifications as well. So
Notifications. It's so
I,
much to
I
say.
know it's a lot. I think like and subscribe's good. We'll just, but we'll work on it. And we are back talking retro gaming briefly. I think this week we'll see. You never know how these things turn out,
Yeah, I feel like
but
whenever we say briefly, it's not.
doesn't work out. But we have been going through the quadrangle of awesomeness that is Another World, Flashback, Fade to Black, Shaq Fu. So we've knocked off two of them so far. We're gonna talk a little bit about Fade to Black today, and then finish with the flourish with Shaq Fu. All these offered by Delphine
Yes.
Studios, and really fun games, each in their own unique way, or not so unique way since some are sequels and all that. But everyone really brings an evolution to some things, which is fun. And so Fade to Black is the one we're going to kind of go with tonight. Um, so in prepping for the show, and somewhere around here, I still got the MS DOS Fade to Black CD for the install, playing it on the PC, and I think that's the way I played it. But as I got kind of prepped for the show, I realized I didn't make it too far through this game.
No, I definitely did. Yeah.
And I mean, I enjoyed the gameplay, and I'm not really sure what happened on why it was released in 1995, about 3 years after of Flashback. And I don't know what happened, but I enjoyed the gameplay. I got into it for a bit, and I think right around somewhere there was a Windows upgrade, and then some questions on would it work on the new Windows system, and you needed to kind of tweak it. I didn't bother to do it. I just got away from it, or I fell into some other interest in gaming. But from what I didn't realize as I went through and watched a couple gameplay videos and all that, to say, wow, you didn't get particularly deep in this game. So
Yeah, no,
some
I knew that I hadn't. That would be the only problem with this one for me, whereas I had played through the others, including Shaq Fu. I had played through the others. This is the one I didn't play all the way through. And I don't know if it was the timing of when it came out. I do remember initially not even like I saw some ads for it, and as a kid, like I whenever I could, I would get all the video game magazines to kind of see what was coming out, and I would always keep an eye out for sequels to games that I really liked. I remember seeing kind of the initial ads, and I wasn't even sure if it was a sequel to Flashback because it didn't say that, and like the character looked kind of similar, the character's outfit in some of those ads. And I was like, oh, that looks a little like Flashback. And it wasn't until like I read a review of it later that I even knew that this was a sequel to that. And I don't think I had this one myself. I think I just kind of played it at someone's house.
Yeah, our the hero Conrad Hart makes his way from Flashback to Fade to Black. Um, there were some repackagings of it later where it was actually called Fade to Black: Flashback 2 to kind of help really drive home this is a sequel. But it is I want to say I mean they shift the gameplay in this. I mean this
Yeah.
goes to a third person shooter mode through the whole thing. A lot of the idea of while it's still pretty basic polygon images, but having a fluidity to it and a kind of an immersive environment that carries forward just great. You get a lot of that same immersive environment and kind of fluid gameplay from Flashback. You get the same thing here and the same kind of vibe, and it's really the same villains. The morphs are carrying forward, but it's done now in third person shooter mode. There's really not anything. I mean, that really you'd call platformer. I mean, there's a few moments in the gameplay that are platformer esque, I guess, a little bit where you're jumping between some squares to avoid things and dodging things from there. But it's much more a third person shooter kind of game, and attractive. You know, again, not highly rendered, not photorealistic, but the gameplay makes sense. The only thing I kind of thought on this one is that the cut scenes were in Flashback, the cut scenes seemed to kind of more naturally flow at sections. These cut scenes were kind of a lot more almost elaborately produced, and they spend a lot of time showing you a better rendered version about what you're going to run into in the game, which was a lot less well rendered version, and that kind of took me out of it a little bit. I said, "There's your spaceship," and then it looks super cool, and then you go, "Well, it's a little blocky now. What happened to it?" But those things happen. But gameplay overall, I thought was good. For a non-Shack related sequel, I think they did a fairly strong job.
And I think you hit on a couple of the things that kept this. And I would love to go back and play it now because I think I'd have a better appreciation from it, having kind of stepped back from it. But I think you kind of hit on why it didn't click for me the same way that Flashback in Another World did for me at the time. The switch to third person, I didn't love. And I remember that right away. Like it felt like a different game. It just had a different feel and a different mechanic to it. So even though it is immersive still, it just didn't have the what I wanted out of a sequel, if that makes sense. Like
Mm-hmm.
it was too much of an abrupt change. And that sounds weird because I don't know if you're a Wolfenstein. I know you're a little bit of a Duke Nukem guy.
Mm-hmm.
Wolfenstein and Duke Nukem made gigantic abrupt shifts to first-person shooters. They did not start as first-person shooters. Wolfenstein 3D, as the 3D in the title suggests, was the third game in the franchise, and they were overhead games that switched to first-person shooter. Duke Nukem had two side-scrolling games, and then switched for Duke Nukem 3D to the first-person shooter game. And while I really, really preferred those, it wasn't. Maybe it was because I felt like they were a step up that I was okay with those jumps. Whereas this one, those games had kind of introduced me to that idea of cinematic platforming. So I was kind of into that. And then they switched it. So that kind of pulled me out of it a little bit. Also, you mentioned the cutscenes, and this is something that I feel like happened a lot on games at that time, especially on CD-ROM games. You see a lot of these at the time impressively rendered cutscenes in these games. And a great example I would give people is go back and play the original Tekken game, the fighting series. Tekken starts with this really long, very cinematic cutscene. In fact, I could be wrong, and somebody fact check this for you, but I believe they had a filmmaker direct the cutscene, like the opening cinematic scene. I'm almost positive that was like a big selling point of the game. Like, directed by the special effects director of whatever movie or something like that. It was this big CGI cinematic cutscene. And then comparatively, and again, Tekken looked great for the time that it came out, even the regular gameplay. But compared to that cutscene, it looked like the characters were made out of Legos.
Yeah.
As soon as you got into the actual fighting. And I'm talking about the first Tekken for anybody who's curious to go and look at it. And again, neither looks that impressive now, whether it's the cutscene or the gameplay, but that's an extreme example of it, where you had these really, at the time, beautifully, fluidly rendered cutscenes, and then the characters sort of look like Legos. And they do that thing that a lot of, especially fighting games that initially made that jump to 3D environments, where the characters' physics don't quite work. They kind of float a little bit when they jump or you fall and things like that. So I know exactly what you mean with the cutscenes.
Yeah, and that was Another World and Flashback had cutscenes as well, but they kept it in the same resolution. I mean,
Yeah.
you didn't really depart the game aesthetic for the cutscene, where in this one it does, and that was just a little distracting because you guys said, well, why can't the guys I'm fighting look like what you just, or because even the CD loading kind of thing would show the morphs or different characters kind of beside the CD spinning as you're kind of jumping to the next scene, and then you come in and then they were Lego-esque combatants from there. But still while I think it falls short of Flashback in terms of kind of repeat enjoyability and all that. It's still good gameplay. It's still very fluid. There's still kind of puzzle solving. It moves along at a different pace. It just doesn't hit it out of the park for me. as much as some of the earlier ones did. So
Same, yeah, absolutely same here. And it could be one of those situations too where, because I don't dislike the game, it could be one of those situations that where it's just we're unfairly comparing it to something that we really love, and that's a thing that happens. And I was actually just talking about this with our friend Tony. We do movie review, like horror movie reviews, and we were comparing the prequel to the movie The Thing to the movie The Thing, the John Carpenter movie. And I like the prequel movie, and so does Tony. But when you hear us talk about it and compare them, you wouldn't think so. But it's just because we're sort of unfairly comparing it to a movie that we think is nearly perfect. And that's the thing with Flashback. Like Flashback looked amazing and got me interested in this whole new type of gaming that I continued to play, these sort of very fluid cinematic platforming games, and got me interested in that whole thing. So it's unfair to, this one is a good game that tried some different stuff, and I'm holding that against it, that it tried some different things, and that's why it's not as good to me. But at the same time, if it just rehashed it, I would complain about that too.
yeah, yeah. So I mean, it's definitely enjoyable. And next time you see Tony, tell him congratulations from me that he was able to get you to create a T-shirt quality logo for the other show you do. I think that's awesome that you put in that kind of work for that show. Impressive. Just saying. Anyway, anything else before we wrap it up for this week?
No, I think that's everything, sir.
Cool. Awesome.
Shaq Fu's next, everybody.
Yeah. Buckle up. All right. Thanks for watching, folks.
Thanks, everybody.